Okay, ready to dive in. We're
Right.
tackling Chapter 14 of the personality puzzle today. You guys really wanted a deep dive on this one, all the theories, research, the whole shebang, and how it applies to, real life.
Yeah, it's a pretty packed chapter, so we're covering it all from basic behaviorism all the way to, like, how emotions work. We won't be skipping anything.
Awesome. So let's start at the beginning. Behaviorism.
Mm.
The idea that who we are basically comes from our experiences. It's all about nurture.
Right, behaviorism says our personality is like a collection of all these learned behaviors that we've been shaped by rewards and punishments. Pretty much says our environment makes us who we are.
Makes you think about all the little things that have, like, nudged you in one direction or another in your life, huh?
Yeah.
The chapter talked about three main ways we learn: habituation, classical conditioning, and then operant conditioning.
Let's start with habituation. That's the simplest one. They had that example with the gong, remember? First time you hear that gong go off behind you, you totally jump. But
Yeah.
the second time, what about the third?
You get used to it. It doesn't have the same effect anymore.
Yeah.
I guess that's why even big changes like winning the lottery or a sudden loss don't change your happiness forever like you think they would.
Exactly. We adapt.
Mhm.
It's how we learn to deal with a world that's always changing. Like, even at the neurological level, our brains react less the more we experience something.
So we get habituated to stuff. What about classical conditioning? Isn't that the one with Pavlov's dogs?
Yeah, but it's way more than just dogs drooling. Think about, like, how certain foods or places give you a specific feeling. It could be good, like the smell of bread baking that reminds you of your grandma's kitchen.
Or a bad one, like a song that was playing when you had a really rough breakup. Our emotions get tied to random things based on what happened to us before.
Exactly. Advertisers use that all the time, pairing their product with images or music that makes you feel good. But there's a kind of a dark side to this kind of learning, too. Learned helplessness.
That feeling of, why bother? Nothing I do makes a difference. The chapter connected that to depression, that feeling that what you do doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it shows how important it is to feel in control of your life. If you just keep having bad things happen and it seems totally random, you can get that helplessness. And that can really mess you up.
It's like those experiments where they gave animals shocks no matter what they did.
Yeah.
Eventually they just gave up. Pretty depressing.
Right. Shows you need to feel like your actions actually lead to something. Otherwise, you just become passive.
Okay, so that's classical conditioning. Now, what about operant conditioning? That one feels more like active learning, all about consequences, right?
Yep. If doing something gets you a reward, you're going to do it more.
Well-
If you get punished, you're probably not going to do it again. Like those pigeons pecking for food pellets. They learn that doing that gets them what they want.
But the reward doesn't always have to be something you can hold, like food, right?
Yeah.
It can be praise or even just feeling good about doing a good job. It's about what motivates us.
Exactly. And that's where shaping comes in. Like when you're training a dog, you reward them for getting closer and closer to doing what you want until they get the whole trick.
The chapter had that funny story about Skinner's students training him to lecture from the doorway without him even realizing it.
Aha, yeah. Funny story. But it shows how our behavior is shaped by little things in our environment, even if we don't realize it.
That's wild. Makes you wonder what kind of subtle conditioning is happening to us all the time. But even though behaviorism is interesting, it feels kind of incomplete, like it's missing something important.
You're getting at what a lot of psychologists started to realize. Behaviorism is great, but it doesn't really explain all the complex stuff going on in our heads, like our thoughts and emotions. That's where social learning theory comes in, like behaviorism 2.0.
Ooh, an upgrade. That's where we finally admit that humans aren't just pigeons in a box, right? We watch, we think, we interact. It's more than just stimulus and response.
Exactly. Social learning theory says we learn by watching, thinking, and being social. Not just from rewards and punishments. We're trying to make sense of the world around us.
So it's not just about our own experiences, but also seeing what happens to other people, the examples we have, social rules, all that. Feels much more, human.
It does, right. The chapter pointed out some things that classic behaviorism missed. Like, they used a lot of animal research, which is useful, but doesn't always translate perfectly to people.
And the big one, behaviorism kind of ignores that humans have minds. We think. We have reasons for doing things, fears, all that. That all goes into making us who we are.
Exactly. We're not just reacting to stuff. We're always processing information, making choices, and coming up with our own interpretation of the world.
So who are the big names in the social learning thing? Jeb mentioned three, right?
Yeah, Dollard and Miller, Julian Rotter, and probably the most important one, Albert Bandura. They each added something new to behaviorism, making it more complex.
Let's start with Dollard and Miller. They actually tried to combine behaviorism with Freudian psychoanalysis. Unexpected combo.
Right. It's a weird pairing, but they wanted to connect those two ideas. Like they said, even our instincts like aggression are learned responses to feeling frustrated.
So they're saying even our basic urges come from our experiences. I'm not sure what to think about nature versus nurture anymore.
Haha, it definitely adds another layer. Now, Julian Rotter focused on expectations. He said it's not just about the reward itself, but whether we think we can actually get it. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, like you're more likely to apply for a job that pays well if you think you have a chance of actually getting it. How confident we are, what we believe about ourselves, matters a lot.
Think about it. Would you try for something you knew you couldn't get? Probably not. Our beliefs really affect how we go after our goals.
Like that saying, if you think you can, you can. But it's got to be realistic too, not just positive thinking.
Exactly. And that leads to one of Rotter's big ideas, locus of control. Do you think you control your own life, or that it's controlled by stuff outside of you? That belief can totally change your behavior.
That's a deep question. Makes you realize how much our beliefs actually shape what happens in our lives.
They really do. And that brings us to Albert Bandura. His work on social learning is probably the most famous and influential.
He's the one who did that Bobo doll experiment, right?
Huh.
Kids watched adults hit a doll and it did the same thing.
Yep, that's the one. That study was a game changer. Proved that we learn just by watching others, especially people we look up to.
Makes you think about things like violence in movies, or even just what kids see their parents doing every day. We're like sponges, always absorbing information from the people around us.
And Bandura didn't stop there. He also talked about self-efficacy, believing in your own ability to do something.
So it's not just whether we're actually able to do something, but whether we think we can. That belief can really push us forward.
Totally. If we think we can do it, we'll try harder, keep going, even when it's hard, and usually we end up succeeding. And if we don't believe we can, well, we probably won't even try.
That's where that just do it thing comes in, right? It's
Yeah.
about pushing yourself and realizing you can do more than you thought you could.
Exactly. That idea that we can actually change how capable we are by trying hard, that's really important in social learning theory. It's not just about what you're born with, it's about what you do with it.
This is making me think about the choices I make and what I believe about myself. It's like we have more control than we realize.
You're getting it. But we're just scratching the surface here. The chapter goes even deeper into things like motivation, goals, and strategies, how all that mixes with our environment to make us who we are.
Okay, so we've talked about how our experiences, both what happens to us and what we see happen to others, shape how we act. But what about the stuff inside that makes us do things? Like what makes us want certain things or go after specific goals?
That's where motivation comes in. It's the next big thing the chapter covers. And it goes way beyond basic needs like, being hungry or thirsty. It gets into those big goals and dreams that give our lives, like, purpose.
It's like we're figuring out the why behind our behavior now, not just the how.
Right. And the chapter starts off with a really simple question. What do you want? Like, what are your goals? Then it talks about the difference between those little everyday things we got to do and the bigger, more abstract goals that, give our lives meaning.
It's like making a to-do list versus figuring out your dream job, right? We need both. The small stuff keeps us moving, but the big dreams are our compass.
Totally. It's like those two bricklayers. Remember that example? One guy's just focused on laying each brick perfectly. The other one sees himself as building this whole cathedral. Both are important, but that big vision can really get you going.
So how does the chapter break down these different types of goals? Something about ideographic and nomethetic goals.
Right. Ideographic goals are those super personal ones, the things that matter most to you, your own values and desires, not what society expects.
Makes me think of people who do things their own way, like becoming an artist or traveling the world, even though everyone tells them to get a real job.
Exactly. The chapter breaks down ideographic goals even more into current concerns, personal projects, and personal strivings. Current concerns are those things bugging you right now, finishing a project, remembering to pick up milk, that kind of stuff.
The things that clutter up your mind until you either do them or decide they don't matter.
Then there are personal projects, the stuff you do to reach your goals. Planning a trip, learning a skill, working on something creative.
Taking those big ideas and actually making them happen.
And those projects can totally change over time, What's a big deal now might not matter at all in a year or two.
So true. Life's all about adapting and shifting our focus as we grow, I guess. What about personal strivings? Those sound like the big overarching themes that guide our lives.
Exactly. They're the long-term things that really matter to you, being a good parent, helping your community, learning, and growing.
Those strivings can be really motivating, but they can also clash, right? Like if you have two that are hard to make work together.
Like wanting to be super successful at work, but also spend lots of time with family, those two can be tough to balance.
Classic problem.
Yeah.
So what about those nomothetic goals? Those are the ones that like pretty much everyone wants, right?
Yep. The things that connect us as humans, no matter how different we are. The chapter looks at a few different ways to understand these shared motivations.
There's McClellan's big three: achievement, affiliation, and power.
Those are biggies for a lot of people. We want to achieve things to feel good about ourselves, we want to connect with others, and we want some control over our lives.
Makes sense. Those seem like the basics for a good life. Accomplishment, relationships, and being able to make your own choices.
Right. The chapter also talked about 5 nomothetic goals: enjoyment, self-assertion, esteem, interpersonal success, and avoiding bad stuff. That kind of expands on the big three, shows how complex motivation really is.
And then there's that idea that all our goals come down to just two things: work and love.
Hmm.
Seems like a lot of theories point to those as being essential for a meaningful life.
Yeah, it fits with what Freud said, that love and work are what keep us mentally healthy. Seems like even with all the variety and what people want, some basic things drive us all.
It is interesting how these different theories all kind of circle back to the same ideas. Oh, I remember Carol Dweck had that interesting theory about judgment goals versus development goals, too.
Oh, yeah. Dweck's theory is great for understanding how our mindset affects how we act. Are we more focused on proving ourselves, looking good, avoiding criticism? Or are we more into learning, getting better at things, pushing our limits?
Makes me think about students who are so scared of getting a bad grade that they won't even try hard stuff. They'd rather look smart than actually learn something new.
That's a perfect example of a judgment goal mindset. They're so worried about appearing competent that they miss out on real growth.
But a student with a development goal sees a challenge as a chance to improve. They're not afraid to make mistakes because they know that's how you learn.
And Dweck connects these different types of goals to what we believe about intelligence. Do we think it's fixed, or that we can get smarter by working at it?
So it's not just the goal itself, but what we believe about what's possible. If we think we can change and grow, we'll face those challenges head on.
Exactly. It's all about that growth mindset, both for ourselves and for others. Super important for like teachers, parents, everyone.
It is pretty amazing that our mindset can have such a huge effect on our lives.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about goals, but what about actually reaching them? What about strategies?
That's where personality strategies come in. The chapter starts with a really simple example. Getting a burger at McDonald's. We all have a plan for how that usually goes, right?
Stand in line, order, pay, wait for your food. It's like a little script that gets you what you want. But obviously the strategies we use for those big life goals are much more complex.
Yeah, for sure. The chapter talked about some interesting examples, like the authoritarian personality. They tend to follow authority figures and try to dominate people below them. It's how they navigate social hierarchies.
Then you have evaluators versus locomotors, people who are always judging how they're doing, versus those who just want to get things done. That might explain why some folks procrastinate while others just jump right in.
And of course, there's the classic optimist versus pessimist, totally different ways of dealing with uncertainty.
Optimists expect things to work out, which can be really motivating. But it can also lead to disappointment if things go wrong. Pessimists, though, they expect the worst. Helps them deal with anxiety and be ready for anything.
The chapter even talked about something called defensive pessimism, using negative thinking to cope with anxiety and motivate yourself. Sounds weird, but it can actually work for some people.
Like they're mentally preparing for the worst case scenario. So if anything better happens, it's a bonus. Not sure I could handle that, but it's interesting how different strategies work for different people.
The main takeaway is that there are lots of ways to reach your goals. The best strategy depends on you and the specific situation.
So it's about figuring out what works for you, what plays to your strengths and helps you deal with the world in a way that feels, real and effective. All this talk about goals and strategies is making me feel something. Maybe it's time to dive into emotions.
Let's do it. Emotions are powerful, and they shape a huge part of our experience and behavior.
Okay, we've covered so much behaviorism, motivation, and now we're finally getting to emotions. They're such a big part of being human. They color how we see things, affect our decisions, everything.
Yeah, emotions can seem kind of mysterious and unpredictable, but This chapter really tries to break them down. Like, what are they made of and how do they make us who we are?
Right, we all have emotions, but it's hard to explain what they actually are. We know how it feels to be happy or sad, but defining it, I think it's kind of tricky.
The chapter said emotions are kind of procedural knowledge, like knowing how to ride a bike. You can't just read about it, you gotta experience it to really get it.
And just like learning to ride a bike, those emotional experiences shape who we are, how we react, our personality. It's all connected. So how does the chapter break down this whole emotion thing?
They say it's a four-stage process. It starts with appraisal, that first moment when you figure out if a situation matters to you emotionally, like, do I need to pay attention to this? Does it affect me?
So like, if someone cuts me off while I'm driving, I might think, hey, this idiot almost hit me.
Yeah.
And that kicks off a whole bunch of emotional and physical stuff, like my internal alarm bells go off.
Exactly. Then comes the physical reaction. Your heart beats faster, muscles tense up, maybe you even sweat. It's your body showing how you feel.
Then there are those nonverbal things we do, facial expressions, gestures, all that. It's how we show our emotions without even talking.
Think of how people show anger, frowning, clenched fists, yelling. All those things tell other people what's going on inside.
And finally, there's motivation, that urge to do something about it. Emotions aren't just feelings, they make us ACT.
Right, if you're angry, you might want to confront the person who made you mad. If you're scared, you might want to run away. Emotions make us do stuff.
But this is where it gets interesting. The chapter said these stages don't always happen in order. Sometimes our body reacts before we even know what's going on.
Oh yeah, totally. You might feel anxious in a crowded room without knowing why. Or start laughing or crying before you even understand what's happening.
It's like our emotions have a mind of their own sometimes. Makes you wonder how much control we actually have over them.
That's a question people have been asking forever. We might not be able to completely control our emotions, but we can definitely learn to manage them better.
Okay, so let's talk about types of emotions. Are there some basic ones that everyone has? Like, are they hardwired into it?
Paul Ekman, he's a big emotion researcher. He said there are 6 basic emotions that everyone has and recognizes no matter where they're from. Happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, and disgust.
So a smile means happy and a frown means sad anywhere you go. Those seem like the basic building blocks of how we express emotions.
Exactly. Those are probably rooted in, evolution, important for survival and communicating with each other, but obviously there are way more emotions than just those.
Right. The chapter talked about the big 3 model, basically saying most emotions are either positive, negative, or neutral.
It's a simplified way to look at things, but it helps to organize all those different emotions, and then there's the circumplex. That's a really cool idea.
The circumplex is like a map of emotions, right?
Yeah.
It shows them based on how intense they are and whether they're positive or negative.
Yep. Arousal is about how much energy the emotion has, and valence is about whether it feels good or bad. So excitement would be high arousal and positive valence, while boredom would be low arousal and neutral valence.
It helps you see how all the different emotions connect to each other. And it shows how complex and nuanced our emotions really are.
And it also shows how differently we experience emotions. Some people are super expressive, others keep it all in. Some people feel everything really strongly, others are more chill.
That's all part of what makes us unique. Oh, and then there's emotional intelligence. That seems super important for relationships.
Yeah, emotional intelligence is being able to understand and manage your own emotions. And do you recognize how other people are feeling? Like having emotional radar?
So it's about knowing yourself, being able to control your own reactions, and picking up on what other people are feeling.
People with high emotional intelligence are usually good with people, they're empathetic, and they can handle tough social situations well.
Then there's the opposite, alexithymia. That's when people have trouble understanding and expressing their own emotions.
Yeah.
Must be really hard to connect with others if you have that.
It can be, yeah. Makes it tough to understand and respond to what other people need emotionally. It shows how important our emotions are, just as important as our intelligence and thinking abilities.
Emotions aren't just these fleeting things. They're a core part of who we are and how we interact with everyone else. But now I'm curious, how does all this stuff we've talked about, learning, motivation, emotions, how does it all fit together to explain personality?
That's where those cognitive theories of personality come in. They try to put all those pieces together.
Like we're going from the individual parts to seeing the whole picture.
Exactly. The chapter talks about 2 main ones. Walter Mischel's CAPS, cognitive-affective personality system, and Carol Dweck's Beats theory, beliefs, emotions, and action tendencies.
Mischel is that same guy who said the situation matters just as much as our personality. Now he's got his own theory. What's CFPS all about?
CAPS says it's all about the interplay between our thoughts and beliefs and our emotions. It's not just our traits, but how those traits come out in different situations.
And he uses this if-then model, which makes a lot of sense.
It's basically saying, if I'm in this situation, then I'll probably react this way. Like, if you're shy and you're at a big party, you might feel awkward and want to leave. But if you're with close friends, you might be more relaxed and talkative.
So our personality isn't set in stone. It's more like a bunch of different responses that come out depending on where we are and who we're with.
Exactly. And all those if that 10 patterns come from our experiences, how we learn, and how we process things emotionally and mentally. Mischel called it our behavioral signature, the specific way we react in different situations.
Like our own personal code for navigating the world. What about Dweck's Beats theory? How does that fit in?
Dweck's theory is even bigger. She's trying to combine beliefs, emotions, and actions into one big personality theory. She says we all have 7 basic needs that make us do what we do.
7. That's a lot. Tell me more.
Okay, the first 3 are trust, control, and respect. We need to feel safe in our relationships, feel like we have some control over our life, and feel valued by ourselves and others.
Yeah, those sound pretty crucial for being happy and well-adjusted. What about the other 4?
They build on those first 3. Predictability, acceptance, competence, and self-coherence. We want some stability in our lives. We want to be loved for who we are. We want to feel capable, and we want our lives to have meaning.
It's like building a pyramid, right? Those first 3 are the base, and then the others are built on top of them.
Exactly. Dweck says these needs lead to our goals, and those goals shape our beliefs, emotions, and actions. The beats. It's all connected what's going on inside and what's happening around us.
Like a chain reaction needs lead to goals. Goals shape our thoughts and feelings, and then those thoughts and feelings guide what we do. Wow, it all comes together.
And over time, all those patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting become what we call personality traits. We start to see those same themes in how we approach life and deal with other people.
So personality isn't just this fixed thing. It's always changing based on our needs, goals, beliefs, emotions, and actions. It's a process.
Right. It's dynamic, always evolving, like a tapestry woven from our experiences and everything going on inside us.
This deep dive has been a lot, but it's also really encouraging. Like, we have some say in who we become.
That's a big takeaway from this chapter. Personality as a verb. It's not just who you are, but what you do, how you think and feel, how you interact with the world.
So it's not just a label. It's an active process, a journey of figuring yourself out and growing, and it keeps going your whole life.
We never stop learning, adapting, and changing based on our experiences, choices, and even what we believe about ourselves. It's pretty amazing.
It makes you think about how powerful our choices really are. We're not just a product of our genes or our environment. We can shape our own personality and become the best version of ourselves.
That's the cool part. This chapter gave us so many ideas and insights to understand how we work, but it's up to each of us to use those tools, make good choices, and create a personality that feels real and fulfilling.
Like, we got the map, but we get to choose the adventure. Well, I think we made it through this chapter. We covered all those theories, research, and how it applies to real life.
We started with basic behaviorism and ended up with those complex cognitive theories. Covered everything from learned helplessness to emotional intelligence.
What a journey. Hopefully you all understand yourselves and the people around you a little bit better now.
Remember, personality isn't a finish line. It's about the journey. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing.
Until next time.